I've said many times that science is neat. But sometimes it is also messy. Carlos converted one of our guest rooms into a laboratory so he can spend more time at home and get some needed renovations done on his laboratory downtown, which seemed like a great idea until I realized that it's impossible to contain chemical odors and stains from getting all over the rest of the house. Not only did acid eat through our new Egyptian tiled backsplash, but also a petri dish grew feet and walked outside, only to walk back inside tracking mud all over my new hand-woven Svitzian rug. The last straw was when Carlos stained all of his shirt sleeves, not to mention his hands, and somehow even the quartz countertops a dull green, which completely threw off my kitchen color palette. I told Carlos he had to stop, but he insisted he had made a major breakthrough in his doorless fridge invention. "Cecil, this is so exciting," he said, bouncing up and down like a child who wants a toy or needs to pee. "The problem with refrigerators is the door. In order to put food in or take food out, you have to open the door, and that's totally bad because it lets all the cool air out, raising the temperature of the other food inside." I told him that's not that big of a problem, but his face darkened and he said, "Baking is an exact science, Cecil. If the butter is off by a couple of degrees, my croissants are ruined." I understood, but I asked that he find another place to conduct that particular experiment. He's turning everything in our home a dull green, including his own skin. Anyway, there is also a giant empty storage shed out back of their new home, and Steve and Abby told Carlos he could work in the shed until his laboratory downtown is ready to use again. So far, it sounds like everything is working out fine for Carlos, although he did accidentally leave a large green handprint on Janice's new car. The good news is, she thought it looked really cool, so she decided to leave it. I talked to Carlos today. He's been running his experiments over at my sister Abby's new house in an old storage shed out back because, well, his laboratory is under renovations and he was making such a huge mess over here with all of his chemicals staining everything. Abby is, of course, married to Steve Carlsberg, who is home from the hospital with a cast on his foot. Carlos told me Steve is fine. He's having a hard time adjusting to crutches and he's still shaken by the whole experience. But he's focused on rebuilding the bank and getting everyone back to work. Carlos said he had met Susan Willman several times before. "She's delightful," Carlos said, which I'm sure I misheard. He's also met Jesse before, too. "Oh, he's always over there. Real nice guy," Carlos said. "He once told me, 'You're a scientist,' and it was the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. So I showed him my lab and just talked his ear off about my doorless fridge project. Jesse got so excited he had to leave after only 15 minutes. Carlos said that since the robbery, though, Jesse has not looked as cheerful or healthy. Jesse looks sick, like he's nauseated. Carlos said he joined the crew for lunch today and cheered them all up with funny stories about science, but he's taking a break from his experiments and should be home early today. Carlos ran out of the chemicals he needed to continue his work and has to wait a few more days to get more. "I thought I had plenty of it," Carlos said. "I calculated exactly how much I needed, but it wasn't near enough. Well, this is why I studied science instead of math." "Anyway, Steve's going to be fine," Carlos said. "I love you." And I said, "I love you too." You might think that last part wasn't necessary for the news story, but it was. Love is the most important news story. I didn't know what to do, so I called Carlos. He said he was coming home early today, but I hadn't seen him yet. He didn't answer his phone, so I called my sister Abby. She was understandably upset about her husband's arrest. I told her I would do everything in my power as an investigative journalist to vindicate Steve, even if it means starting a podcast. She sighed and said, "I know." When I asked if Carlos was still at her house, she said, "He's gone." "Oh, good. I'll see him soon then," I replied. "No," Abby said, "you won't. The police were just here questioning me and Janice. Then they took Carlos with them to the station. They said they're not done with their investigation. My brother-in-law, Steve Carlsberg, is still in jail, wrongly accused of the recent bank heist. But I am happy to have my husband Carlos back home. The sheriff's secret police had only taken him in for some questions regarding the robbery of the last bank of Night Vale. Sheriff Sam had deemed Carlos a person of interest, which I've been saying for years, but Sheriff Sam meant it differently. Carlos said while he was being questioned at the police station, he saw the other bank employees who were there the day of the robbery. Genevieve Daly, the new bank teller, was being asked if she saw anyone other than Steve Carlsberg near the vault that day. Carlos said she was stone-faced, unhappy with the interrogation. Susan Willman was there, crying, as the police asked her who else, other than Steve Carlsberg, could have a key. And security guard Jesse McNeil was there, looking quite ill, almost seasick, according to Carlos, as the police tried to badger him into implicating Steve Carlsberg. Carlos has been home for a couple of weeks and in a terrible funk. He said Steve has a nearly impossible case. The police are convinced of Steve's guilt, and all their evidence points directly to him. Carlos hardly has any energy or emotion to work or even leave the house. I feel awful for Steve, too, and we are doing our best to support him and our family. I tried cheering Carlos up by telling him my favorite science jokes, like two chemists walk into a bar and one tells the bartender, "I'll have an H2O," and the other says, "I'll have an H2O too." And the bartender sighs and says, "It's been a long day, guys." And then the two chemists nod and say, "Yeah, oh, got it. Yeah, sorry, just a couple of waters, thanks." And then later they make sure to tip very well. But Carlos didn't even crack a smile, let alone laugh, and I asked him how his doorless fridge experiment was going, and he's welcome to work on it here in his home laboratory. I don't even mind if he keeps staining everything green with that weird gel he's been using. "I ran out of gel, Cecil," he said, prone on the couch, not opening his eyes. "I couldn't work on that, even if I wanted to, which I don't." I want to curl up on the couch too. Stay home from work. But I know that would be terrible for Carlos. There are many times I have felt flat or depressed, and Carlos has been there for me, keeping me company, taking in my sadness and reflecting back not a false smile, but attentive eyes. A listening posture that makes me feel heard and understood, and that's what I want to be for him. Sheriff Sam said the lab results came back. The fingerprints were inconclusive, as their top suspect, Steve, worked at the bank, so his fingerprints were everywhere. But the lab reports did detail a strange goo police found on the vault walls. This goo, a light green gel, was also found on the walls of the cells that the other robbers had escaped from 2 weeks ago. So maybe my theory about space slugs is correct. No, wait. The lab results showed that this unusual chemical can render certain metals intangible, allowing people to reach through walls without breaking them. But police believe whoever used this greenish goo used it to rob the bank's vault and to free the prisoners inside the abandoned mine shaft outside of town. The sheriff then said they discovered this exact same chemical on Steve Carlsberg's property. They discovered it inside the shed behind the house, and that this is the final piece of evidence that links Steve Carlsberg to the robbery of the last bank of Night Vale. They believe that... Oh no. Steve did not act alone, that he had an accomplice, a scientific mastermind, who created this chemical for him, who generated a complex concoction that enabled them to walk through walls, stealing whatever they wanted. They have a warrant out now for Carlos's arrest. God, I've got to call Carlos. It looks like he left a voicemail.
Hey, sweetie, it's me. So listen, I have so I've just been arrested. No biggie. I'm fine. This is actually pretty good news because I wanted to talk to the sheriff anyway about all this. So that's great. And I do have some new thoughts about what happened at the bank, and they're really interesting. So they're driving me downtown to meet with ouch. Those cuffs are a bit tight there, Officer Q Fortier. Oh, that is a beautiful name. Is that Frenchian? If you don't mind, Officer Fortier, I'm going to just finish my voicemail to my husband. So, Cecil, when I get downtown, I'll explain everything to them. Steve and I clearly did not do this, and that's what I'll tell them. They're police. They just want to know the truth. And, Officer Fortier, I'm not done with my call yet. Sir, what are you doing with my phone?
Carlos! Thank you, Carlos, for your brilliant and thorough evidence that put Jesse McNeil in jail today. Our security guard of nearly 50 years committed a heinous crime, and he nearly sent the two of us to prison for it. When Carlos arrived in my cell this morning, he was all smiles, saying he had figured it out. He called the sheriff over and said, check Jesse's skin for the same chemical they found on the doors. Carlos had been experimenting with a gel that allowed him to reach his hands into refrigerators without opening the door and thus lowering the temperature of the food inside. He had developed this chemical in his temporary lab in a shed behind our house. The problem with the chemical wasn't its effectiveness and intangibility. He'd been able to make that work. No, the problem with the chemical is that it stained everything it touched a dull green, including skin. Carlos showed me his own hands, which were green from the fingertips to about halfway up his forearms. He said the last few times he had seen Jesse looked ill. Not like a flu or cold, more like seasick, queasy, green in the face. Carlos didn't put it together right away because we all felt sick about not only the robbery, but the false charges against me. The smoke from the fire and the three robbers waving guns provided a distraction for Jesse to cover himself with Carlos's intangibility gel, sneak downstairs past my office where he had locked me in earlier that day, and then unload the cash from the safe and carry it into the alleyway behind the bank where his car was parked. When the fire trucks arrived, Jesse ran deliberately in front of their hoses so that the gel would all be removed from his body before the police began questioning those of us who had been inside during the robbery. But as Carlos pointed out, the gel stains the skin for a long time. Water alone won't remove it. Sheriff Sam brought Jesse back in for questioning based on Carlos's statements and found Jesse's skin was the same dull green as Carlos's hands. But unlike Carlos, the green stain covered Jesse's whole body, not only his hands, indicating he had used it to walk through walls rather than merely reach through a door. Carlos explained that he had Jesse in his lab many times. Jesse and all my employees come to my house regularly for dinners. Like I said, they're family to me. Jesse had taken an interest in Carlos's science projects, so Carlos showed Jesse his doorless fridge experiment. Not long after that, Carlos noticed that the rest of his intangibility gel was gone. He thought he had just run out, even though he had made plenty of it. It never occurred to Carlos until he saw Jesse's green face a few days ago that Jesse had stolen it to remove the money from the vault and his criminal colleagues from their jail cell. Sheriff Sam was impressed with Carlos's explanation and arrested Jesse McNeil on the spot. Jesse turned to Carlos and Sam and said,
I guess I'm going to jail now.
And Sam said, don't flatter yourself. Anyway, I finally get to return home, thanks to my brother-in-law Carlos. Abby, Janice, I'll be home in a few. Can't wait to see you both again. Oh, maybe I'll bake some scones tonight. Carlos showed me a way to do it without letting the butter get too warm. Oh, yeah!
I'm so relieved and so glad they put the right person behind bars. And I have never been so excited to try one of Steve's scones. That really is neat. Well, listeners, we have all been grappling with the same problem. Time has become normal in Night Vale, or as normal as time ever is. Time is pretty weird everywhere. As a result of this shift in our experience of time, none of us are remaining the same age for centuries anymore. When I think about what my life would be like after Carlos, or what his life would be like after me, these are the kinds of fears that can't be shaken off by the light of day, that linger even after all the shadows of evening have faded. Is love a gift in a finite world? I'd like to think so, but oh, my stomach is in knots. I'm sure yours is too. And off it goes. Another win for the First Amendment. Listeners, I am opening the heavy metal doors, and inside it is dark, even in this late afternoon sun. I am stepping in. My eyes are adjusting, and oh my God! Listeners, oh my God! The tanks are full. Frozen, intact human brains attached to various support equipment. It is all completely clean and seemingly running well. This isn't a scam. The great Casper Rhodes is telling the truth. Death is now voluntary. Aging is meaningless. We will all see the future. We will all see the future. Listeners, I must go. I must talk to my husband. We can be together forever, don't you see? A new world awaits us in the future. I must talk to Carlos. I must. I am currently getting together the funds to purchase this service for both myself and my husband, Carlos, because I believe that the two of us can live together forever. No more is there this awful time limit ticking down from the moment of our meeting until the moment of our parting. Now our brains will sit snugly next to each other until we are awakened anew to a bright future. Carlos says he is a little unsure about this because he thinks that death is one of the most scientific processes of all. But he'll come around. We'll just talk about it, and he'll see it my way. After all, we have the rest of our lives, and our lives will never end. Now, there are only a few people left in town who haven't signed up. I am a little ashamed to say that Carlos and I are one of those few. It's taking me longer than I thought to scrape together the money, and Carlos still wants to talk about it more, but don't worry, we will definitely join you all in the future. We were all wrong trying to fight death this way, to put our trust in the future as though it would be anything but some other person's present. Carlos was right, I was wrong. Carlos has forgiven Telly for cutting his beautiful hair all those years ago. And so I should too. There are lots of things I should do, and I'm sure I'll get to them eventually. In the meantime, though, I have come to think that Carlos was right. There is nothing more scientific than death. We fear it reasonably, because it is a thing we can never know, perhaps not even when we experience it. My husband and I adore cats. We're always ranking them because love is above all else a competition. So we figured we should put Koshek out there for an objective ruling on our own beliefs that he is the best cat in the world. It should be an easy win for our little boy. Also, they wanted Koshek's last name, and I had never thought of a last name for our cat. I told Carlos we should put his last name as Koshek's last name because Carlos has a much more interesting last name than me. Plus, Carlos is pretty well known and very well liked in town. Everybody knows his last name, and I thought that might carry some political weight in the minds of the judges. But Carlos insisted that we use mine, because I found Koshek and adopted him. So there you go, little kitty. You are Koshek Gershwin Palmer, a champion name for a champion cat. It is silent now in the station, save for the panting exhaustion of frightened human owners and the strained, wheezing breaths of unconscious cat show judges. I think Carlos and I have a great shot at winning this thing, listeners. It's hard to tell what cats are thinking or feeling.
but I think Kaushik is happy. He's happy to have such a loving home and 2 doting dads. For this year's Children's Fun Fact Science presentation, we will be looking into the history of the space race. My husband Carlos has been helping me research this. Thanks, honey. And so it should be airtight and without error. My husband Carlos, he's a scientist, and he is also very good at his job, tells me that it's impossible to have far more departures than arrivals, but I told him, not everything has to make sense all the time. Night Vale. Carlos and I went to see a new play the other night. It's been ages since we went to the theater. I think the last show we saw was Hamilton, which is a Tony and Pulitzer-winning hip-hop musical about figure skater Scott Hamilton, who died in a duel to fellow Olympian Katarina Witt. Hamilton was wonderful, but live theater is so expensive. It's a rare treat for us to get out of the house, what with the cost of tickets, plus dinner, parking, a babysitter, tuxedo rentals, and all that time spent watching YouTube makeup tutorials for jamming facial recognition cameras. And I'll admit to being a bit nervous venturing out at night to a heavily guarded home for the criminally insane. But Carlos put me at ease by rolling his eyes. He said it was neurotypical ableism that makes us think this way, that movies and TV shows often play up harmful tropes about psychopaths and lunatics planning daring escapes so that they can return to a life of criminal misdeeds. Carlos explained that asylums are merely places where we hide away the people who most remind us of the inexplicable fragility of the human brain. Driving out past the scrublands under an indigo sky, the full moon low over the horizon, backlighting the Night Vale Asylum atop its jagged, rocky ridge. My nerves returned. I thought I heard coyotes howling in the distance, but it was the car stereo. Carlos had put on his favorite new Frank Ocean album called Various Animals Screaming. The warden escorted Carlos and me to our seats, which were simple wood chairs. And upon this last line, the alarm bells of the asylum rattled my ears and my nerves, shaking Carlos and me from our seats. The inmates scattered in every direction as Sheriff Sam and their officers gave chase. Carlos was nearly stepped on by one of the escapees, and as I bent to help him up, I was knocked over by 2 officers in full sprint. After 15 minutes, Carlos and I returned to our seats, hoping, but not truly believing it really was an intermission. We've seen immersive theater before, like Sleep No More, an interactive show in New York City where audience members are placed inside a huge warehouse of actors dancing out the plot to Macbeth. And at the end, everyone is granted the ability to live out the rest of their lives without sleep. It's expensive and not for everyone, but totally worth it if immersive theater is your thing. But as Carlos and I left the theater space, we walked down the long corridors, cells and rooms open, no security detail in sight. I mean, about 30 minutes in, Carlos and I were like, is there going to be a car chase or a shootout or something? I mean, that play was boring. And then suddenly, there was both. Carlos and I attended the production of the play 18713/NTSB, partially to have a nice date night, just the 2 of us, but also because I was curious if I would see Amelia Anna Alfaro there. According to Doug Biondi's journal, which Carlos and I found inside the asylum after the play, Warden Charles Rayner developed a paradoxical logic for dealing with his inmates. He encouraged them to talk openly about their feelings under the guise of healing them. But the more they expressed their thoughts and emotions, the more the warden used this information as proof of their insanity and, by extension, ineligibility for release. So, back in 2015, my devoted husband and devoted scientist, Carlos, was heading a research project into a desert otherworld, a place very similar to our own. We spent almost a year apart while Carlos was in this alternate dimension performing experiments and
drawing charts and pouring bubbling liquids back and forth between flasks. It was hard. We had only been dating a year when he left, but we kept in touch, talking almost every day, sending each other text messages at night, like a kissy face emoji with a big red heart emoji. Or sometimes we sent racier messages like the safety goggles emoji, with the police siren emoji and the first place ribbon emoji. Oh, sorry if that's a little too graphic. Anyway, Carlos made friends during his many months out of town, and so when he finally decided to return to Night Vale, some of those he met followed him. They came through a portal Carlos discovered in the desert otherworld, a one-sided door. It was difficult to find in a never-ending sandscape, but it is still there. And, as Carlos said, once you know the way, you never forget it. One of the people who came with Carlos through the portal in 2015 was Charles Rayner of Beckett, Massachusetts. But Carlos discovered something this week. In reading Doug Biondi's journal, Doug makes passing mention of Warden Rayner cautioning his inmates against listening to the voice of the pilot. The warden warns them that the pilot can control other beings with his mind. It is odd that the head of a mental health institution would patronize his patients with their own inner demons. Carlos at first thought the warden was manipulating the mental stability of his charges to stir up their fear and confusion in order to keep them there. We don't know if the warden profited from retaining inmates or if he just felt an evil thrill from playing these games. But in Doug's notes, the warden apparently said, "It is possible to escape the allure of the pilot, the power of his voice. Some have, but it is rare, and it is dangerous that you can hear him at all." Carlos remembered when he first met Charles Rayner 5 years ago in the desert otherworld. Charles was so enthralled with Carlos's stories of Night Vale. Charles Rayner could not wait to see this fantastic town and, more importantly, to leave the terrible place in which he lived. He told Carlos that he escaped some frightening people there. Carlos said to me, "Cecil, sweetie, my hypothesis is Charles Rayner was flying home from Detroit to Albany on June 15th, 2012. And I said, "What are you saying, honey pup?" And Carlos said, "Babe, his plane blipped out of the sky and into the desert otherworld." And I said, "Are you saying, kitty cake, that Charles was a passenger on Delta 18713? But then Carlos said, "You know, little piggy pie, all this work talk is exhausting. Let's have a glass of wine, sit out on the deck, and enjoy the nice weather." Listeners, I called Charles Rayner, and I told him what Carlos and I talked about, and he confirmed what we discovered. He was indeed a passenger on 18713. But why does he communicate only through Doug? I mean, why not Carlos or Dana Cardinal or Sheriff Sam themselves? Why not recruit everyone who knows the way into Night Vale? "I don't know, Cecil," Charles snapped back. "But I don't will it into existence by yapping about it either, so drop it. When I talk to Carlos, the voices go away. Thankfully, I have my greatest peace when I am with my favorite person. I can't keep Carlos awake at all hours or have him skip work to be with me, so I have to learn to make peace with the voices. I brought Carlos to the studio. When I talk to Carlos, I don't hear the voices of the passengers from 18713. I don't hear the voices even now as I look directly at Carlos while I'm speaking. Like Charles Rayner's fishing hole or Amelia Anna Alfaro's puzzles, Carlos grounds me. Lets me be wholly me. Thank you, Carlos. Oh, I also had Carlos bring a pair of handcuffs with him that he bought at Target on his way to the station, and used them to shackle me to my desk. If Charles Rayner is correct, then once the pilot can speak to you, he can control you, and if that should happen, it won't happen, but if it should, then now I won't be able to leave here and do harm to anyone else. Carlos, you don't hear the pilot's voice, and thus cannot be controlled. But I do, and I can. I have been controlled. We're in trouble, Carlos. I can't stay chained to this desk forever, can I? And if the pilot means to destroy you, he might make me do it myself. Just promise me you'll run. Leave me behind if that happens, okay? Okay. But for now, do not let me out of these cuffs. Not even if I use a safe word, which I hear is something quite a few people use in healthy, fun, intimate relationships. Stay tuned next for the sound of me talking to Carlos forever and ever. Good night, Night Vale. Good night. Carlos sits with me still in my studio. When I talk to Carlos, I do not hear the voice of the pilot nor his passengers. I have found that Carlos calms me, centers me, silences the echoes of 100 different people, 100 different thoughts in my head, none of which are my own. If you know what centers you, do that immediately. They stalk outside my studio now, climbing the walls, smashing in windows, knocking down doors. I can hear them in the hallways behind me. Carlos is barring the door to the studio, but I know it will not hold. Carlos, do as you promised and run! I will stay focused. I will keep my head safe. I will take us all to the weather. I am captured, Night Vale. So is Carlos. I can't see where they took him, so I keep my eyes closed and imagine Carlos's face. I keep talking to this image of Carlos to protect my thoughts from the pilot's voice. The ragged, empty-minded clan of Flight 18713 pushes me into a larger group of captives. I still do not see Carlos, but I see the violence-hungry faces of those under the pilot's control. I see 2 teenage boys who are secretly mad for each other. I see a middle-aged man who either went to New Orleans or heard about New Orleans so much that he might as well have gone. I see the people who inhabited my mind, whose voices were used to hypnotize me, to lay the psychological groundwork for the pilot. And I hear them. I hear their voices coming from their mouths, live, in real time. But I hear them in my head, too, separate from their bodies. And I think of Carlos again, trying to stop the echoes to return to silence and clarity. They lead our group, I with my head down, eyes closed, quietly conversing with an imaginary Carlos to the steps of City Hall, to the feet of the ruthless Amelia, Anna, Alfaro. I think of Carlos's face. I say aloud to my imagined Carlos, the first time you called me, I knew you liked me, even though you avoided my flirting. I thought you were trying to be professional, Carlos, playing ignorant, but you weren't. You were shy. You didn't know how to ask. And I knew I loved you. My mind remains clear as I talk, but I see several of the remainders struggling to ignore the pilot's voice permeating their every thought. A few lose the fight and join his clan. He is too far from me, too far from any of the rest of us to reach him. To subdue him, to kill him, to get back my mind, to get back my town, to get back my Carlos. I search in vain for Carlos one last time, battling the sick truth that we are born alone and we will die alone. I help free the others one by one, still searching for Carlos, and then I find him. He is in the very back, the last of Night Vale. Those who are free are running or embracing or helping those who are still bound or drunk with confusion. And on the ground where Amelia stood moments before, I find the wrinkled note from mother to daughter. It is a series of numbers, not words. I show it to Carlos. A cryptogram puzzle, he says. I love those. I ask him if he can solve it. He screws up his face. We should get out of here first, he says. Please, I say. He looks at it for a couple of minutes until finally he says, it's a basic alphanumeric code. It reads, Amelia, I am proud of you, no matter what. Carlos and I hold each other through the town, passing two teenage boys dressed in scraps of airplane upholstery, gripping tightly each other's faces. We help a lost toddler find his parents. We clear broken glass from streets. We walk home. We shade our eyes from the setting sunset, which kindles through a hilltop cleft. We talk nonstop about today, about tomorrow, about yesterday, about every possible moment, just talking, and talking because we almost lost our talk forever. We do not hear the returning echo of sirens across the valley. We do not hear anything but ourselves. Stay tuned. Next, for a silence that is all your own.
Into the scrublands I went, myself already as happy as I could ever be, for I was with my own true love, my husband. I journeyed to see the Whittler for myself as an effort of journalism, a chronicler of interesting events. I wanted for nothing. My happiness cannot be improved. Or so I believed. When I arrived, the Whittler, more than 100 feet away, and through a mass of thousands, greeted me with a nod so unobtrusive, I believed it to be a trick of the eye. But from the distance, I could see the whole of the universe in those dark eyes under dark shadow behind the final violet of sunset. I knew he meant me. Carlos and I stepped to the podium, and the old man opened his palm to reveal an original carving just for me. I had hoped it was a Nintendo Switch, but it was a seaplane. Carlos, like a child on Santa's lap, cooed and asked the old man for a superconducting super collider, and the old Whittler, his burlap cheeks heavy with gravity and history, reached into the breast pocket of his pearl-snap shirt and handed Carlos a tiny wooden rose. Carlos hugged his rose to his chest, and I my seaplane. It seemed that Victor was even more busy in retirement than he had been in his long career. Returning to his community seemed to invigorate him. He helped Carlos with experiments at the labs, donning goggles and lab coats and writing down numbers with hearts around them, all of that science stuff. Carlos said he was surprisingly good at it for someone without training. There was Carlos in an understated lab coat, frowning. There was nothing more scientific than death, and yet Carlos hated the fact of it, and he wrestled with the contradiction within himself. Some natural processes feel unnatural, no matter how many times they occur to us. They are a surprise that our whole life spends telegraphing.